Jake Martinez figured he'd seen some crazy stuff in his 32 years on this earth, but nothing could have prepared him for what waited beneath 200 feet of Alaskan ice. The helicopter blades chopped through the frigid air as he pressed his face against the frosted window, watching the endless white expanse stretch out below like some kind of frozen hell. His buddy Marcus Williams sat across from him, looking green around the gills despite being a decorated Army veteran who'd supposedly seen action in 3 different continents. "Yo, you good, man?" Jake shouted over the roar of the rotors. Marcus just nodded, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the safety harness. The other 3 passengers didn't look much better. Rebecca Thompson, or Becca as she insisted everyone call her, was a journalist from Seattle who'd somehow sweet-talked her way onto this expedition. She was busy scribbling notes in a weatherproof notebook, her blonde ponytail whipping around despite being tucked under a fur-lined hood. Tyler Rodriguez, the team's equipment specialist, sat with his eyes closed, either sleeping or praying, hard to tell which. And then there was Dr. Emma Caldwell, the brains of this whole operation, a paleontologist from Boston who'd made the discovery that brought them all to this godforsaken frozen wasteland. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Caldwell's research team had been conducting routine climate surveys when their ground-penetrating radar picked up something weird. Real weird. What they thought was just another ice cave turned out to be something else entirely, something that had Emma burning up the phone lines to every major university and research institution in the country. She'd called it the find of the century, but when Jake pressed her for details during their initial briefing, she'd gotten all cagey, talking in circles about unprecedented preservation and specimens that challenge our understanding of historical timelines. What really got everyone's attention, though, was when the CDC got involved. You don't get federal disease control showing up unless something serious is going down, and that's when Jake knew this gig was gonna be anything but routine. He'd signed on as head of security, figuring it'd be easy money babysitting some eggheads while they got excited about old bones. Now, watching the research facility come into view through the swirling snow, he wasn't so sure. The compound looked like something out of a science fiction movie, a cluster of prefab buildings connected by enclosed walkways, all of it sitting on the ice like a metal spider. The main structure was a massive dome that housed the excavation site, and even from the air, Jake could see the glow of industrial lighting making the whole thing look like a landed UFO. The helicopter touched down with a bone-jarring thud, and everyone started gathering their gear. "All right, people, let's move it," Jake called out, his military training kicking in automatically. Temperature out there is -25, and that's not counting wind chill. You got exposed skin, you're gonna lose it. Stay close, stay smart, and for the love of God, don't touch anything until Dr. Caldwell gives the okay. They hustled across the landing pad, the wind hitting them like a physical force, trying to knock them off their feet. Jake had spent time in some harsh environments, but this cold was different. It went straight through every layer of clothing and settled into your bones, making you feel like you'd never be warm again. The entry airlock hissed open, and they practically fell inside, grateful for even the minimal shelter. A guy in his late 20s with red hair and freckles greeted them, his face breaking into a wide grin. "Dr. Caldwell. You made it. We were starting to worry the storm might keep you grounded." Emma pulled back her hood and shook the snow from her jacket. "Danny, these weather patterns would have to try a lot harder than that. This is my team. Everyone, this is Danny O'Brien, he's been coordinating the on-site operations." Danny shook hands all around, but Jake noticed the kid seemed jittery, like he'd been mainlining coffee for the past 72 hours straight. His eyes had that slightly wild look people get when they've seen something that messes with their head. "How's the situation?" Emma asked, "All business now." Danny's smile faltered. "Stable, mostly. The specimens are still frozen, but Doc, we've been having some weird readings on the thermal sensors. Temperature fluctuations in Sector 7 that we can't quite explain." Emma frowned. "Fluctuations? What kind of range are we talking about?" Danny pulled out a tablet, his fingers dancing across the screen. Nothing major, just a few degrees here and there, but it's enough to cause some melting in the outer chambers. We've tried to compensate with the cooling systems, but whatever's causing it seems to be coming from inside the ice itself. Jake exchanged a look with Marcus, who'd gone from looking sick to looking concerned, which somehow seemed worse. "Doc, maybe we should hang back, get the full briefing before we go poking around down there," Jake suggested. Emma waved him off like he was a mosquito. "Nonsense. We need to assess the situation immediately. If there's melting occurring, we could lose valuable data." She turned back to Danny. "Take us to Sector 7. I want to see these specimens firsthand." The facility was bigger than it looked from outside, a maze of corridors and laboratories carved right into the ice. The walls were reinforced with some kind of clear polymer that let you see into the frozen depths, and Jake had to admit it was pretty incredible. Shapes moved in the ice like shadows, preserved in crystal clarity. At first, he thought they were animals, maybe prehistoric mammals like mammoths or saber-toothed cats. Then they passed a section where the ice had been cleared away, and he got his first real look at what Dr. Caldwell had discovered. "Holy hell," Marcus breathed, stopping dead in his tracks. "Those are people. Dead people. Not just dead," Jake realized. These were bodies, dozens of them, frozen mid-motion like some kind of macabre time capsule. But something was off about them. Their faces were twisted in expressions of rage and hunger, mouths open in silent screams, hands curved into claws. And their eyes, even frozen solid, had a milky quality that made Jake's skin crawl. "Not people, exactly," Emma said, and was that excitement in her voice? "Come on. You've got to see the rest." Becca had her phone out, snapping pictures like crazy, her journalist instincts overriding any sense of self-preservation. "Dr. Caldwell, are you saying these aren't human remains?" Emma kept walking, forcing them to follow or get left behind. "Oh, they're human, or they were. But something happened to them, something that transformed them before they froze. The preliminary analysis suggests some kind of pathogen, a virus or bacteria that we've never encountered before. It altered their physiology in remarkable ways." Tyler finally spoke up, his voice tight. "You're talking about zombies. Like, actual honest-to-God zombies." Jake wanted to laugh, to tell the kid he'd been watching too many horror movies, but the words died in his throat because deep down, looking at those frozen faces, that's exactly what they looked like. Emma didn't confirm or deny it, which was answer enough. The term zombie is scientifically imprecise, but yes, these individuals appear to have been infected with something that caused extreme aggression, cannibalistic tendencies, and remarkable resistance to physical trauma. The preservation is so complete that we've been able to extract tissue samples, and what we're finding is extraordinary. Their cells show evidence of a forced metabolic state that kept them mobile long after clinical death should have occurred. They reached a security door that required Danny to input a 6-digit code plus a fingerprint scan. "We've kept Sector 7 on lockdown since the temperature anomalies started," he explained. "Only essential personnel allowed past this point." The door opened with a hiss of pressurized air, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees at least. Jake could see his breath forming thick clouds, and ice crystals started forming on his eyebrows immediately. The chamber beyond was enormous, a natural ice cavern that had been expanded and reinforced. Industrial lights hung from the ceiling, casting harsh white illumination over the scene below. In the center of the room was what could only be described as a frozen tableau of horror. Hundreds of bodies, locked in eternal combat, preserved perfectly in the ice. Some were clearly the infected ones, with their twisted features and violent postures. Others were normal people, men, women, even children, caught in the moment of their deaths. "Jesus Christ," Jake muttered. "What happened here?" Emma walked right up to the ice, placing her gloved hand against the surface like she was greeting an old friend. Based on what we've been able to piece together, this was some kind of settlement, maybe 5,000 years old, give or take a few centuries. Something came to this place, something that infected the population and turned them into these creatures. There was a battle, a last stand if you will, and then the ice came. A sudden freeze, fast enough to preserve everything exactly as it was. Becca was writing furiously, her breath coming in quick gasps that might have been fear or excitement. 5,000 years? These things have been frozen for 5,000 years? Emma nodded. At least. The really fascinating part is that the virus, or whatever it is, appears to be intact. Dormant, but intact. In theory, if the bodies were to thaw completely. She trailed off, but everyone got the implication. Marcus stepped up next to Jake, his voice low. "Boss, this is crazy. We need to get out of here, call this into someone with more firepower and better sense." Jake agreed, but before he could say anything, an alarm started blaring. Red emergency lights began flashing, turning the white ice into a strobing nightmare. Danny yanked out his tablet, his face going pale. "Oh no! Oh no, no, no!" Emma grabbed his shoulder. "What is it?" "Report." Danny's voice cracked. "It's Sector 4. The cooling system just failed. Temperatures rising fast, already up to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That might not sound warm to most folks, but when you're dealing with ice that's been frozen for 5 millennia, it might as well be a furnace." Emma started barking orders. "We need to get to Sector 4 now. If those specimens thaw, we could lose everything." Jake had different priorities. "If those specimens thaw, we could have bigger problems than lost data, Doc. Everyone back to the entrance, we're evacuating until we can figure out what's going on." For a second, it looked like Emma was going to argue, but another alarm joined the first, this one even louder. Danny checked his tablet again, and his face went from pale to absolutely white. "Sector 4, something's moving in there." The words hung in the air like ice crystals, nobody wanting to acknowledge what that might mean. Tyler broke the silence. "Moving? How can something be moving? Everything's supposed to be frozen solid." Danny's hands were shaking as he pulled up a video feed. The tablet screen showed a dark corridor, ice-covered walls glistening in the emergency lighting. At first, Jake didn't see anything unusual. Then something shifted in the background, a shadow that shouldn't have been there. The shape lurched forward, and the camera got a clear shot. It was one of them, one of the infected. Its skin was pale and mottled with patches of freezer burn, and chunks of ice still clung to its body. But it was moving, stumbling forward with that distinctive shambling gait that every zombie movie had gotten disturbingly accurate. Its eyes were open now, no longer frozen but very much aware, and they burned with a hunger that had survived 5,000 years of frozen sleep. "Everybody move, now!" Jake shouted, his training taking over. He grabbed Emma by the arm and physically hauled her toward the door, Marcus already covering their six with the pistol he'd kept holstered under his parka. Tyler and Becca didn't need to be told twice, both of them sprinting for the exit. Danny brought up the rear, still clutching his tablet like a lifeline. They burst through the security door, and Jake spun around to seal it behind them. "Danny, lock it down." The younger man fumbled with the controls, managing to engage the security protocols just as something heavy slammed into the door from the other side. The reinforced metal buckled slightly, and they all jumped back. Another impact, harder this one, and the distinct sound of fingernails scraping against steel sent shivers down Jake's spine. "That door rated for this kind of abuse?" Marcus asked, his weapon trained on the shaking metal. Danny shook his head. "It's designed to keep people out, not to keep something in that doesn't feel pain or fatigue." Another alarm joined the chorus, and Jake was starting to really hate that sound. "Let me guess, another sector warming up?" Danny checked his tablet, and somehow his expression got even worse. "All of them." Every sector is showing temperature increases. It's like something triggered a chain reaction. Emma had gotten over her initial shock and was back in scientist mode, which Jake decided might actually be more dangerous than the zombies. This doesn't make sense. The cooling systems are completely independent, with multiple redundancies. There's no way they could all fail simultaneously unless... She grabbed Danny's tablet, scrolling through data so fast Jake couldn't track what she was looking at. Unless it was deliberate. Danny, who else has access to the environmental controls? The color drained from Danny's face. Just me, you, and Dr. Patterson. But Patterson's been off-site for 3 days, attending a conference in Anchorage. A terrible silence fell over the group. Then who? Emma started, but she was cut off by the sound of gunfire echoing through the facility's corridors. Not the pop-pop-pop of a handgun, but the sustained rattle of automatic weapons. Marcus and Jake locked eyes, a whole conversation happening in that one look. They'd both heard enough combat to know what a firefight sounded like, and that was exactly what was happening somewhere else in this frozen nightmare. The security team, Danny said weakly. They must be engaging the specimens in Sector 4. More gunfire, closer now, and then screaming. The kind of screaming that spoke of pain and terror and things that shouldn't be happening. Becca had gone pale, all her journalistic bravado evaporating in the face of real danger. We need to leave. We need to get to the helicopter and get out of here right now. For once, Jake completely agreed with her. Danny, fastest route to the landing pad. Go. They ran through the corridors, the sound of chaos growing behind them. The facility's intercom crackled to life, a panicked voice shouting through heavy static. All personnel evacuate immediately. Multiple containment breaches. The specimens are active. Repeat, all personnel, the message cut off with a scream and the wet sound of tearing flesh. Jake tried not to think about what that meant for whoever had been making the announcement. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with 3 people running the opposite direction. One of them was wearing a security uniform, his weapon empty and his face covered in blood. The other 2 were researchers in white lab coats, both looking like they'd aged 20 years in the last 5 minutes. Don't go that way, the guard shouted. The whole north wing is compromised. There's dozens of them, and they're fast, way faster than they should be. Emma grabbed him. How is this possible? The thaw rate should be gradual, it should take hours for them to regain mobility. The guard laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Well, someone forgot to tell them that, lady. They're moving like they were never frozen at all. An explosion rocked the facility, sending everyone stumbling. Alarms were going off everywhere now, and Jake could smell smoke. Fire, that's just great, Marcus muttered. Because this situation wasn't bad enough already. Tyler pointed down a side corridor. There. That's a service tunnel that connects to the garage. We can get to the vehicles. They changed direction, following Tyler's lead. The kid knew the facility layout from studying the plans before their arrival, and right now that knowledge was worth its weight in gold. The service tunnel was narrow and dark, lit only by flickering emergency lights that cast dancing shadows on the ice walls. Jake took point, with Marcus covering the rear. They moved fast but careful, every shadow potentially hiding something that wanted to eat them. About halfway through the tunnel, they heard it, footsteps behind them, multiple sets, moving with that distinctive dragging shuffle. Marcus glanced back and cursed. We got company. At least 5, maybe more. Jake picked up the pace. Go, go, go! They burst out of the tunnel into the garage, a massive space that housed snowmobiles, snowcats, and one beautiful, functional truck with tank treads designed for ice travel. Tyler made a beeline for the vehicle while Jake and Marcus set up a defensive position at the tunnel entrance. The first zombie emerged from the darkness, and Jake got his first good look at one of these things up close. It had been a man once, maybe in his 30s, dressed in ancient furs and leather that had been preserved by the ice. His skin was the color of old parchment, stretched tight over bone, and his eyes. God, his eyes were the worst part. They were aware, intelligent in a predatory way, fixed on the living humans with single-minded hunger. Marcus fired twice, both shots center mass, exactly like they'd been trained. The zombie staggered but didn't fall, didn't even slow down much. Headshots. Emma yelled from behind them. The brain is still the control center. You have to destroy the brain. Marcus adjusted his aim and fired again. This time the zombie's head snapped back, and it dropped like a puppet with cut strings. But four more took its place, squeezing through the tunnel entrance like a grotesque conga line. Jake added his fire to Marcus's, and the garage filled with the thunder of gunshots. Empty brass casings tinkled on the concrete floor. 2 more zombies fell, but the rest kept coming. "Anytime now, Tyler," Jake shouted. The truck's engine roared to life, the sweetest sound Jake had ever heard. "Let's move." Everyone piled into the vehicle, Jake and Marcus jumping in last. Tyler floored it, and the truck lurched forward, its treads finding purchase on the icy floor. One of the zombies managed to grab onto the rear bumper, hauling itself up with disturbing strength. Becca screamed as a rotten hand smashed through the rear window, grasping blindly for anything to grab. Marcus leaned over the seat and put a bullet through the thing's skull, and it fell away, tumbling across the garage floor. Tyler aimed for the vehicle exit, a large rolling door that thankfully was already open. They burst out into the Alaskan night, the storm having intensified while they were inside. Snow whipped across the windshield so thick that Tyler could barely see 3 feet ahead. "Where's the landing pad?" he yelled. Emma pointed. "Northeast, about 200 yards. They rumbled across the ice, the truck's headlights barely penetrating the swirling white. Behind them, the facility was burning despite the ice and snow, flames licking up through the dome structure. Jake wondered how many people were still inside, how many had made it out. He tried not to think about how many hadn't. The helicopter sat where they'd left it, covered in a layer of fresh snow but looking intact. The pilot was in the cockpit, and Jake had never been so happy to see another human being. They abandoned the truck and ran for the chopper, the rotors already starting to turn. Jake was helping Emma up when Danny suddenly shouted. "Wait! The data! All our research, the samples, everything we've discovered is still in the facility." Emma actually hesitated, torn between scientific duty and survival instinct. Jake made the decision for her, bodily lifting her into the helicopter. "Forget it. No amount of data is worth your life." He hauled himself in after her, Marcus right behind him. Tyler and Becca were already aboard, and Danny stood on the ice, looking back at the burning facility with an expression of absolute devastation. "Come on, kid." Jake reached out his hand. For a moment, he thought Danny might actually run back toward the facility. Then common sense won out, and he grabbed Jake's hand, letting himself be pulled to safety. The helicopter lifted off, fighting the wind and snow. Through the windows, they watched the research facility collapse in on itself, the ice beneath it fracturing from the heat. And then they saw them, streaming out of the wreckage like ants from a disturbed nest. Dozens of zombies, maybe hundreds, all moving with terrible purpose across the frozen wasteland. "Where are they going?" Becca whispered. "There's nothing out here but ice." Emma pressed her face against the window, watching the horde below. "They're following us. They can sense the living, and we're the only warm bodies for miles." The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Folks, we got a problem. Storm's getting worse, and we're low on fuel. I'm not sure we can make it back to Fairbanks." Jake closed his eyes and counted to 10, trying to maintain his cool. "What are our options?" The pilot consulted his instruments. "There's an old mining station about 40 miles southeast. Been abandoned for years, but it should have shelter. We can set down there, wait out the storm, and radio for extraction." It wasn't ideal, but they didn't have much choice. "Do it," Jake ordered. The flight was rough, the helicopter bucking and shaking in the wind like a mechanical bull. Several times Jake was sure they were going down, but the pilot somehow kept them airborne. Through breaks in the storm, he could see the frozen landscape below, an endless expanse of white broken only by the occasional rocky outcropping. Finally, a cluster of buildings appeared through the snow. The mining station was bigger than Jake expected, a small village really, built during some long-ago gold rush and abandoned when the easy pickings ran out. The helicopter set down in what had probably been the town square, and everyone climbed out on shaky legs. The pilot killed the engine. "I need at least 4 hours to make repairs and refuel from our emergency reserves. We're gonna be here a while." The mining station was creepy as hell, all these old wooden buildings being slowly reclaimed by the ice. Snow had drifted against doors and windows, and icicles hung from every surface like frozen teeth. But it was shelter, and right now that was all that mattered. They found a building that looked more intact than the others, what might have been a general store or trading post. Marcus kicked in the door, his weapon ready, clearing the interior with professional efficiency. Empty. Looks secure. They filed inside, grateful to be out of the wind. Tyler found some old lanterns that miraculously still had oil, and soon they had light and even a bit of warmth from an ancient pot-belly stove that Danny got working. For a while, nobody spoke. They were all processing what they'd seen, what they'd survived. Finally, Becca broke the silence. "So, zombies are real. Ancient, frozen zombies that can apparently survive being frozen for 5,000 years and then just wake up ready to eat people." Emma had been staring at nothing, but now she focused. "It's the virus, or pathogen, or whatever it is. The preservation was so complete that when the temperature rose, the organisms in their system reactivated. It's actually quite remarkable from a scientific standpoint." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Remarkable. Yeah, that's one word for it. Here's another, terrifying. Doc, those things were smart. Not human smart, but they were coordinating, hunting in packs. That's not some mindless virus, that's something else." Emma nodded slowly. "You're right. The initial reports from other zombie outbreaks, fictional or theoretical, always portrayed them as shambling, mindless creatures. But these showed problem-solving skills, pack tactics. Whatever changed them didn't destroy their intelligence, it redirected it toward a single purpose, feeding." Tyler had been quiet, huddled near the stove. Now he spoke up, his voice small. "Did anyone else notice that the cooling systems all failed at the same time? Dr. Caldwell said it would have to be deliberate. The implication hung in the air." "You think someone sabotaged the facility?" Jake asked. "But why? Who would want to release those things?" Emma's face had gone hard. "Someone who wanted to study them. To weaponize them. There are groups, organizations that would pay billions for access to a pathogen like this. A biological weapon that turns your enemy's population into an army of killers? It's the ultimate doomsday scenario." Before anyone could respond, they heard it, a sound carried on the wind, faint but unmistakable. The helicopter pilot's voice, screaming. They rushed to the windows, looking out into the storm. The helicopter was surrounded. Zombies, at least a dozen of them, were tearing into the aircraft like wolves on a carcass. The pilot tried to run, made it maybe 10 feet before they brought him down. Jake turned away, unable to watch. "How?" Marcus demanded. "How did they follow us?" "We were in the air." Emma's voice was shaky. "They must have tracked our heat signature, followed our trail. If they can survive temperatures that would kill any normal organism, maybe they have adaptations we haven't discovered yet. Enhanced senses, thermal detection." She was spiraling into scientist mode again, using technical analysis to avoid dealing with the horror of what they'd just witnessed. Jake took charge because someone had to. "Okay, new plan. We're on foot now, which means we need to fortify this position and survive until rescue arrives. Marcus, help me secure all the entrances. Tyler, inventory whatever supplies we can scrounge up. Emma, you and Danny figure out the radio situation, see if we can call for help." Becca started to protest. "What about me?" Jake handed her a length of wood that had probably been a table leg. you're on watch. Anything moves out there, you yell. They worked quickly, boarding up windows and doors with whatever materials they could find. The old mining station had plenty of scrap wood and even some rusty tools that could serve as weapons. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Danny managed to rig up a radio from parts he salvaged from some old mining equipment, combining it with his tablet's battery. The signal was weak and filled with static, but it was working. Mayday, Mayday, this is civilian research team requesting immediate evacuation. We are at coordinates. He rattled off their position, repeating the message over and over. For a while, there was only static. Then, faint and broken by interference, a response. Copy your Mayday, situation, rescue team, 12 hours, hold position. 12 hours. They had to survive for 12 hours. Jake looked around at his team, a journalist, a scientist, an equipment specialist, a research coordinator, a soldier, and himself. Not exactly an elite fighting force, but it would have to do. The first zombie hit the barricaded door about an hour later. Just one at first, testing their defenses with methodical precision that was deeply unsettling. It pushed and pulled, probing for weaknesses. Don't engage unless necessary, Jake ordered. Save ammunition. More zombies arrived, drawn by God knows what. The sounds of them moving around outside was constant now, scraping and shuffling and that awful wet breathing sound they made. I count at least 20, Marcus said from his position by a window. Maybe more. Hard to tell in this storm. Emma had been studying them through a crack in the boards. They're not attacking en masse. They're being strategic, watching us, learning our defenses. Tyler's voice cracked. Zombies shouldn't be able to do that. Emma turned to look at him, and her expression was grim. These aren't movie zombies, Tyler. This is something that existed 5,000 years ago, a pathogen so successful it nearly wiped out entire populations. We're not dealing with a modern outbreak that we can track and understand. This is ancient, evolved, perfected over centuries before it got frozen. We have no idea what it's really capable of. As if to prove her point, the zombies suddenly changed tactics. All at once, they rushed the building from multiple sides. The barricaded door shook under repeated impacts. Windows that they thought secure exploded inward as the creatures threw themselves against the boards with suicidal determination. Defensive positions. Jake shouted, raising his weapon. Marcus was already firing, each shot carefully aimed and devastatingly accurate. Zombie after zombie fell, but more kept coming. Tyler grabbed one of the improvised weapons, a rusted pickaxe, and swung it with desperate strength at a zombie trying to climb through a window. The point caught it in the eye socket, and it went down hard. Becca screamed as a rotted hand grabbed her ankle, pulling her toward a gap in the barricade. Danny lunged forward, bringing a heavy wrench down on the zombie's arm. Bone crunched, but the thing didn't let go. It took 3 more hits before the arm finally separated, and Becca scrambled away, the disembodied hand still clutching her leg until Jake kicked it off. Emma had grabbed a lantern and threw it at a group of zombies trying to break through the back door. The oil splashed across them and ignited, and suddenly the things were on fire. They stumbled around, spreading the flames to others, and for a brief moment Jake thought maybe they'd found an effective weapon. Then he realized the burning zombies weren't dying. They were still moving, still attacking, now with the added horror of being on fire. Fall back to the second floor, he ordered. They fought their way up a rickety staircase, Marcus providing covering fire while everyone else retreated. One zombie made it onto the stairs before Tyler kicked it back down, sending it tumbling into its companions. The second floor was smaller, more defensible, with only one staircase access. They pushed a heavy desk to the top of the stairs, creating a choke point. The zombies came up slow but relentless, and the defenders met them with everything they had. Jake's pistol clicked empty, and he switched to a length of pipe, swinging for the fences every time one of those things got close enough. Marcus was down to his last magazine. Tyler's makeshift weapons were breaking one by one. And still the zombies kept coming. We're not gonna make it 12 hours. Becca shouted over the chaos. Emma had a wild look in her eyes. The fire. The whole building is old wood, and those things don't have enough survival instinct to flee from flames. If we can start a controlled burn, funnel them into, Jake grabbed her shoulders. There's no such thing as a controlled burn in a 100-year-old wooden building in the middle of a blizzard with limited exits. That's a suicide plan. Emma met his eyes. You have a better idea? He didn't, and they both knew it. The zombies were almost through their barricade, dead hands reaching over the desk, grasping for living flesh. Fine, Jake said. But we do this smart. We set the fire on the first floor, then we get to the roof. Flag down the rescue team when they arrive. It was a terrible plan with about 1,000 ways to go wrong, but it was all they had. They used the remaining oil from the lanterns, splashing it across the top of the stairs and on the desk. Marcus had one road flare left in his emergency kit, saved for signaling aircraft. Now he popped it, the red light bright and chemical in the enclosed space, and tossed it onto the oil-soaked furniture. The flames caught with a whoosh that sucked the oxygen from the room. The zombies at the front of the pack were engulfed immediately, their ancient dried flesh burning like kindling. The smell was horrific, worse than anything Jake had ever experienced, and he'd been in burning buildings before. Roof access, now. They found a hatch in the ceiling, swollen shut with age and ice. Marcus and Jake hit it together, their combined weight finally forcing it open. Snow poured through, along with wind that threatened to knock them off their feet, but it was better than burning alive. They climbed out onto the slanted roof, the shingles icy and treacherous. The storm was still raging, the wind strong enough to make standing difficult. Below them, the building was fully engulfed, flames visible through every window. And surrounding the building, kept back by the fire but definitely not leaving, were zombies. Lots of them. In the flickering light of the burning building, Jake could count at least 40, maybe 50. Where did they all come from, he wondered aloud. Emma clutched his arm, pointing to the horizon. Even through the storm, they could see it, more zombies, streaming across the ice like a grotesque migration. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The entire population of that ancient settlement, all thawed and driven by that insatiable hunger. The facility, Emma said numbly. When it collapsed, it must have fractured the ice for miles. Every specimen we discovered, every frozen victim of that ancient plague, they're all free now. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a containment breach, it was the release of a 5,000-year-old apocalypse. Tyler was crying, the reality of their situation finally breaking through his shock. We're gonna die up here. Either the fire gets us, or those things do. Becca put her arm around him. Hey, no. We survived this long, we can make it a little longer. Rescue is coming, remember? But her voice lacked conviction. The fire was spreading fast, and the roof was getting hot beneath their feet. They moved to the highest point, huddling together for warmth and what little psychological comfort it provided. Minutes stretched into hours. Jake lost track of time, focused only on keeping everyone alive for one more minute, then one more after that. The storm began to break just as the eastern sky started to lighten. Dawn was coming, and with it better visibility for the rescue team, if they were really coming. If the radio message had gotten through. If they weren't all lying to themselves about having any chance at all. Marcus suddenly grabbed Jake's arm, pointing. Listen. At first, Jake couldn't hear anything over the wind and the crackling of the fire. Then he caught it, the distant thump of helicopter rotors. The most beautiful sound in the world. Signal, he shouted. We need something they can see. Danny pulled off his bright orange parka, waving it over his head like a flag. The helicopter appeared through the thinning clouds, a military Black Hawk with Coast Guard markings. It circled once, the pilot clearly assessing the situation, a burning building surrounded by a horde of creatures that had no business existing. To their credit, the rescue team didn't bug out. The helicopter moved into position, hovering as low as it dared. A rescue harness lowered on a winch, spinning in the rotor wash. One at a time, a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Secure the harness and we'll pull you up. Jake grabbed Emma and physically put her in the harness. Go! She was hauled up, disappearing into the helicopter's belly. The harness came down again. Tyler went next, then Becca, then Danny. The roof was starting to sag now, the fire compromising its structural integrity. You next, Marcus said to Jake. Don't even start with that hero crap, Jake shot back. We go together or not at all. The harness came down again, and Jake was about to grab it when the roof gave way beneath Marcus. His friend dropped into the burning building with a shout of surprise and fear. Jake didn't think, just moved, diving through the hole after him. He hit hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. The heat was incredible, and smoke choked the air. He found Marcus pinned under a fallen beam, conscious but trapped. Zombies were already climbing through the flames, drawn by the living humans despite the fire. Jake grabbed the beam and pulled with everything he had. It didn't budge. A zombie emerged from the smoke, reaching for him with charred hands. Jake kicked it back into the flames, then pulled on the beam again. This time it shifted, just enough. Marcus wriggled free, favoring his left leg but mobile. They stumbled toward the stairs, or where the stairs used to be. The path was blocked by burning debris and more zombies. Window! Marcus shouted. They crashed through what was left of a second-story window, falling into a snowdrift that had piled against the building. The cold was a shock after the heat, and for a second Jake couldn't breathe. Then Marcus was pulling him up, and they were running, limping really, away from the building as it collapsed behind them. The zombies followed, a wall of decaying flesh and hunger. The helicopter had landed nearby, the rescue team providing covering fire with automatic weapons. Move, 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 someone was screaming. Jake and Marcus dove through the helicopter's open door, and the aircraft was lifting off before they were even fully inside. Gunfire continued from the door gunner, keeping the zombies at bay until they were out of range. They climbed fast, leaving the burning mining station and the horde behind. Jake lay on the helicopter floor, gasping for air, his lungs burning from smoke inhalation. A medic was checking him over, asking questions he couldn't quite process. Through the open door, he could see the frozen landscape spread out below. And across that white expanse, dark shapes moved in their hundreds, maybe thousands, spreading out from the facility's ruins like a cancer. Emma sat next to him, her face streaked with tears. It's out. The pathogen is out. Those zombies will freeze again when the temperature drops, but they'll just be preserved, waiting. And if anyone finds them, if there's another thaw. She didn't need to finish. Jake understood. They'd unleashed something that couldn't be put back in the bottle, something that had outlasted empires and civilizations. The creatures that outlasted time itself were free again, and this frozen wasteland was just the beginning. As the helicopter banked toward Fairbanks and civilization, Jake looked at his team, battered and traumatized but alive. They'd survived a journey through a frozen era and witnessed horrors that would haunt them forever. But they'd also survived, and that had to count for something. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Command has declared a quarantine zone, 500 square miles. Military is mobilizing. They'll contain this. Jake wanted to believe that. He really did. But as he watched the sun rise over Alaska, painting the ice in shades of gold and red, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the start. Somewhere in that frozen wasteland, thousands of zombies were settling back into the ice, waiting. And sooner or later, someone else would find them. The creatures had waited 5,000 years already. They could wait a little longer.